Forgive me. So, hello everyone. How are you guys doing? So today we're going to be discussing about a new update, and it's about a new mega project that has been unveiled, uh, which is a huge fertilizer production facility that's going to be established in Gode, which is in south eastern Ethiopia, the Somalia region. And this particular fertilizer facility is going to be built primarily by Aliko Dangote, the business tycoon, originally from Nigeria, with vast investments going across multiple sectors, including but not limited to cement, oil and gas, uh, fast consumer manufacturing, and other sectors as well. So today we're going to be discussing about the potential hope and opportunities that this type of big industrial investment is going to make in the lives of people, specifically around that area, and more broadly, it's a signal for hope for the larger Africa. So I think we'll start with Abdul Bari. And my question to you is, how do you see this landmark investment in fertilizer? I think it's going to be one of the biggest fertilizer facilities in the whole of Africa. And how do you see this new facility in terms of guaranteeing food security, food sovereignty, and catalyzing investment within the agriculture sector?
Yeah, I think what I'll begin with is that Dangote has done it again. Even though we usually hate billionaires because we think that they are kind of accumulating the wealth of all of us. But in the case of Dangote, what we see day in, day out is that he keep on investing in areas that we think are necessary. Look at you talk about cement. He had a lot of investment in cement. You talked about petroleum. He knows that is an important part for African economies. He had a lot of investments in those areas. And now it's fertilizer. He started with his fertilizer plant in Nigeria, which covers about 5,000 acres of land. Yes. And now he's moving to the second largest importer of fertilizer in Africa, which is obviously Ethiopia. Now, what we see is that he's not just an investor. Maybe he could have used his money to trade in US financial stock or whatever and still make the same amount of money. But what this guy is doing is that he is investing in Africa and still making his money. So what he's doing is that he's indirectly distributing his wealth to all of us. And what does this mean for African food security and agriculture? The importance are immense. We can't even talk about it because it's just infinite. Look at it's unfortunate that Africa we have a lot of arable land, and you read in day out that we the food insecurity in West Africa, food insecurity here in and wherever. And then you look at how can we get out of this food insecurity? It means that to get out of this food insecurity, we have to increase what the yield of our agricultural output. And to do that means that we have to use a lot of modern day inputs, which of course fertilizer is the most important one. Our lands, for land when you farm on it for several years, the nitrogen levels reduce. I read a report somewhere. I'm beginning to have a lot of interest in agricultural economics, and I was reading about this some time ago, and they were saying that in Ghana, for example, when you farm a land for a year, you reduce the nitrogen level in that land by, is it 35 kilograms per hectare per year? You can imagine in 4 years, if you don't bring in artificial nitrogen like the fertilizer, it's going to be zero. And that is why we need fertilizer. And with the fertilizer, what is going to happen is that it means now on the same piece of land, you're going to increase your output. You're going to increase your output, and then it means higher outputs mean less food insecurity. And I think this is a huge investment we should all applaud. And I'm really, really excited when I read the headline. Yeah.
Thank you for your insight. And now I turn to Arisa. When you first heard the announcement, what came to your mind, Arisa? Can you share your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Brooke. I don't know if you can hear me. So, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear. So, yeah, thank you. I mean, you have given me a very open question, but I'll try to see what I can say about it in a few seconds. So, for me, when I heard about it, I mean, we are all familiar with the Dangote group, and I don't know, you have a higher context in terms of the Ethiopian investment landscape. But I mean, it is on the first side. I think it is a big thing. It's just is something that we can celebrate. It is very transformative for the Ethiopian agriculture sector, if I can say. So in terms of food security, and I mean, like Abdul has talked about this, also in terms of job creation and trade in the region, and it is not only about Ethiopia but also other neighboring countries. If you look at Djibouti, I think like countries like Somalia and also down in the south, maybe Kenya, Uganda as well. I don't know. Yeah, so I mean it is a good thing, but on the other side, when you look at the deal, I think it gave over 60% control to the Dangote group vis-a-vis the Ethiopian investment hub, which I think it has the rest of the 40% in terms of the control. So that's the first question that it raises, that who has control over this investment that is being promoted in the country. Dangote has 60% and the Ethiopian investment hub has 40%. So that is a big question mark that we need to ask ourselves. But also in terms of the Pan-Africanist point of view, I think for me the most critical thing would have been to involve the state. The state should have had a share in this, because we have a lot of investment on the continent apart from this one. But at the end of the day, if they are not controlled and they are in the hands of these few people, for instance the Dangote group, we have to ask the questions: who is going to benefit in the end? Is it going to be the people? Is it going to be this very same tycoon who is rich, just continue to enrich himself? Or is it going to be the community? Because I think it also raises the question: yes, the investment has come, but again, how does it impact the local communities? Because I think there are also already voices from the local people which expressed their concerns about all the risks that come with such an investment, like constructing this big fertilizer infrastructure or structure within the community, risks to the environment, people losing their land, and I mean we can also relate it to more other projects that we know that are taking place within the African communities, that they always come at the cost of the local people. So we have the few clique of the people who are owning the investment, or the group, like in this case the Dangote group, liaising with the investment hub, the Ethiopian investment hub. But people usually don't ask these questions. Well, how about the people in the community where these investments are happening? Do we see the impact? Do we see the outcome from these investments trickling down to the people? And for me, that one raises the question of industrialization versus the well-being of the people. So what we should ask ourselves: how are the majority people, the local people, Ethiopian people within this area, the Somalia region? Yes, I think some people were celebrating it because I mean this is one of the regions that were not that well off as compared maybe to other regions within the country. But the coming of this investment, on an abstract point of view, is something to celebrate. But again, when we dissect it down and try to see what would be the benefits of the people in the community, maybe there are questions about who is going to benefit from this investment. Has it been transparent enough? are there community safeguards? Like, are there, those systems which shall ensure that what will be coming out from this investment will benefit the whole community, not necessarily a few people? So, I mean, all these are unanswered questions that I see that we need to ask, and I think they haven't been really addressed well, besides celebrating this mega huge investment that has come into the region. But I mean, yeah, that's my point of view. So over to you again, Brooke.
Thank you for your reflections, comrade. And I also want to say a few things. I think you've also raised some valid concerns, some things that we should take note of behind the huge applauses and celebration that has been taking place. So I think the first thing that we have to note is that I think this project has to be admired on one hand for the fact that it's very strategic, meaning that the project didn't just come out of the blue. It didn't just come out of a mere political decision or an abrupt political will. So I think the project is strategic in the sense that it's building on a recently developed natural gas deposit located around the project area. So it's very strategic in that it's leveraging natural gas as opposed to merely exporting the existing natural gas. So I think it's great that we're seeing the government take initiative in terms of utilizing natural gas to solve the food security problem, especially since Ethiopia, on average, imports close to 1.5 million tons of fertilizer per year, which is a huge amount. And once this project is completed at full capacity, this project is expected to more than cover the annual demand for fertilizer imports. So there's a clear existing market for the fertilizer to be produced by Dangote. So it's strategic in this regard as well. Second point is what made me quite happy about this project is the fact that it's really Pan-African. I think we often see a lot of African countries going to London, Paris, historically, and more recently to the USA seeking investments. And I think now is the time that we have to stop and say, why not Africans for Africans? There's no reason why a fellow African cannot invest in another African country. And I think kudos should go to the Ethiopian Investment Holdings. It is a state-owned investment group that encompasses a portfolio of companies, including Ethiopian Airlines, the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, Ethiopian Telecom, all the state-owned enterprise. And I think under a recently revamped leadership, they have done well in terms of signaling to outside investors like Aliko Dangote that they're more than welcome, and they will get, if not equal, even a better treatment compared to his Western counterparts. So I think Aliko Dangote knows when he's coming to Ethiopia that he's getting the red carpet, and he's going to be getting not only the proverbial red carpet treatment, but also the political will and follow-up that any important investment requires. And I think the Ethiopian Investment Holdings also has a skin in the game, backing it with a 40% investment that would let Dangote know that he's not in it alone. But also, Comrade earlier raised a valuable point about ownership, whether the people around that particular area actually benefit from this project. And that's going to be something that we will have to see in time, because often promises are made in advance, but it always boils down to execution. But what's really interesting about this particular area is it's a very remote area in a way. Even though the Somalia region within Ethiopia is geographically the biggest, it's the most sparsely populated in terms of population density. But still, I think with the discovery and development of natural gas and this new particular come under spotlight in terms of investment and first-hand benefit, given the fact that most of the resources will be flowing out from that area. So I think you raised a very valuable concern, and I also see a potential conflict brewing if this is not addressed beforehand. I think that particular bordering region is also adjacent to the Somalia country, and there seem to have had been and still there is instability around that region, mainly Al-Shabaab, and with natural gas being developed there in hundreds of millions of dollars, and now fertilizer project. One cannot help but ask whether there are going to be security guarantees and whether the people around there are actually going to benefit from the project, of course, firsthand. But more importantly, it also has a very positive aspect of it in terms of ownership. So historically, I think also Risa has also mentioned the fact that this particular area within Ethiopia isn't really much more famous like the capital per se, like Addis Ababa, and there's a lack of decentralization in investment, not only in Ethiopia, but generally in Africa. We have a tendency to overinvest in the capital or very few select areas and neglect the peripheries. So, but what we have seen recently, not only with the new fertilizer investment in Gode, Somalia region, which is more than 800 kilometers away from the capital, but we've also seen the Grand Renaissance Dam, which is going to be inaugurated later, which is also built in another periphery. So I think this is quite interesting to see that a new $2.5 billion of investments being made there. So I think the fact that it's decentralized is really nice. And I think, Erisa, I will let you weigh in more.
Yeah, thank you, Brooke. I mean, you raised very important and valid points. I just want to add in a little bit before I think you take it back to Abdul. But I think, like, for me, really, when I look at the Dangote group, because the first red flag that we see in this investment is the fact that the Dangote group has secured a 60% stake in the investment, which is something higher compared to what the Ethiopian investment hub is having in this investment, 40%. So that is a red flag on who owns and who controls this investment. I mean, like, from my point of view as an African, you raised this point, like, yeah, this is something to celebrate from a Pan-African's point of view, because now investment is coming from someone or from the group that is bred within Africa, the African continent. But again, like, I would really love to see, like, really the local Ethiopian companies, because what we are trying to move away from is the monopolization of a few corporations in terms of this investment. Because when we talk about investment in Africa, of course, the Dangote group is there. It's something that you cannot overlook. But I mean, like, we need to replicate at least and have more other groups coming up, taking charge, and getting these investment opportunities. But the more we say that, or the more we see the Dangote group taking all of these investment opportunities, is the more we are going to just reproduce the problem. Because the problem of African investment has been the domination of Western European investments that are not locally bred. But again, also, we have to be critical towards what the Dangote group is turning into. Yes, we have talked about all of those benefits, but the more we shall have Dangote dominating all of these investment, moreover with such a stakes in the holdings that are being established, it doesn't solve the real problem that we are trying to fight, because at the end of that day, it is going to be extraction and use of these resources by a foreign investment company in this case, which we all know that is bred from Nigeria, exploiting the resources in Ethiopia, but not necessarily bringing the benefits back to the Ethiopian community. And as I already said, that there are a lot of already questions which are coming in from the community. To what extent are they benefiting? All of those kind of questions that are really important in my point of view. So yeah, I'll leave it at that point. And
Yeah, let me weigh in on that. I think that what Erisa is saying is important, but I think what is important right now, to my point of view, is not what Erisa is talking about now. You see, we have continental goals that we have to meet now, and every investment, we know that looking at it, the prima facie of it, you may have concerns about it. But I think that for every project at the initial stage, if we subject it to this kind of nitty-gritties, we can even get far. So you look at things like, if you take the Abuja 2006 declaration, since that time, we've been trying to reach 50 kg per hectare fertilizer usage in Africa, and we've never gotten there. I learned in Ghana, we are doing 37 kg per hectare. That is far below the continental goal, which was set somewhere in 2006, and we haven't gotten it. That's like almost 20 years ago. Then you talked about the fact that the whole world, some places are having like over 300 kg per hectare, and we are still at doing 2030. That is something we very concerning. So the Dangote company, you realize that by giving 40% to Ethiopia, I think is a good initial days. We don't have the papers to read to discern whether is good or it's not good. We don't know what this person is bringing on board and what this person is bringing on board. Just like Brooke said, you realize that the Dangote company is taking a lot of risks. Look at the region where they are investing. It's a volatile region. No Western company would do that. Today may be stable. Al Shabaab and those things, they are just nearby. You can finish building everything, investing this $2.5 billion that Dangote is planning on investing. You can finish investing all that in the 40 months plan that they have planned. And then the next day, you have these terrorists coming to bomb up everything. So I see that although it's a concern that we shouldn't let private individuals hold higher shares than the government for national security or whatever issues. But on this case, I think Dangote company is taking a lot of risks that we should appreciate. And beside that, I also think that most government holdings tends to be inefficient. I don't know for the case of most African countries, but in Ghana, we have what the president was so confused that a government company that produces alcohol was running into debt. How is that possible? He said, Ghanaians, when we are happy, we drink. When we are not happy, we still drink. So there's no way for such a company to run into debt. So that is to say that it's even in the interest of the Ethiopian government not to have higher stakes, so that the control and the management of that thing will be on the Dangote company. Now, still going back to the general African view, if you check the goal of the project, you realize that they said they're going to produce about 3 million, is it tons or metric tons of this fertilizer? And Brooke was saying that Ethiopia import like, is it
1.5 million annually?
1.5 million tons annually.
Yeah.
So you see that they want to produce double of that. And where does this double go? It means that it goes to the neighboring countries that are closer, like Kenya, Uganda, all those areas. And it means that it's coming to even boost our inter-African trade that we've been talking about. My only concern here is that when this 1.5 million tons extra is being exported instead of being traded within Africa. We've seen quite a few of those occasions, because trading within Africa, a lot of landlocked countries, and transport within the land with bad road infrastructure is going to raise up the cost of the fertilizer. So they will just think about rather exporting to other countries than intra-African trade. So I think the deal, to me, is the best deal we can have for the continent right now. Back to you, bro.
Thank you, Arisa. Thank you, Abdul Bari. I think Comrade earlier raised some interesting points. Whether why didn't the Ethiopians leverage local capacity? Maybe how would the arrival of Dangote, already a renowned conglomerate, affect potential new industries within that particular sector? And I think this is a valid concern. But I think one thing we have to realize is that specifically in Ethiopia and more broadly in Africa, there is an issue of capital accumulation, and this particular problem is even severe in the case of Ethiopia. It's really challenging to raise the necessary capital locally, and I think, as Abdul Bari also mentioned, Dangote is taking a huge risk. So I also do understand that he's bringing to the table a significant portion of the investment. So we have to admire that. And I think when we're saying that the Ethiopian Investment Holding provides 40% of this investment, it's probably going to be an in-kind investment in terms of granting land on which the project is built, and also maybe providing natural gas ingredients as input to the newly to be built factory. So we have to understand that it's the issue of capital accumulation that's preventing not only Ethiopia from executing on a grand and productive facility, but also other African countries interested in building a fertilizer facility or some other very strategic manufacturing industry. And additionally, I think one of the reasons why Dangote was, I think I should say, courted to come and invest is the Ethiopian government has made an effort to build a factory by itself using its state-owned enterprises, and it was a colossal failure. So there was a facility called EIU soil fertilizer factory, and the factory was built in a very rushed manner without analyzing the return on investment, without analyzing the cost factors, which include not only logistics, inputs, but also expertise needed to build that particular facility and also run it. So what happened was the government ended up spending an enormous amount of money only to realize in the project that it wasn't going to be profitable. And when the government realized that, a lot of money was wasted. The project had progressed close to 50%. An immense amount of money was wasted. But one thing they realized was that when doing this kind of mega projects, you actually should know what you're doing before you pick up a shovel to dig the dirt. You have to really understand: is there a return on investment for the people, for society? Does it make sense economically? Is it really feasible to set up a facility? So when you see an investor like Dangote risking billions of dollars, more than $1.5 billion, you have to understand that he believes in this. So we're risking private capital here, which hasn't been the case in most of Africa. So I think this is a really big signal, especially for Ethiopia, in terms of attracting private investments, because I think due to our socialist history, we have been unfortunate enough to attract a lot of investment. And Erisa, back to you.
Yeah, so yes, thank you. I absolutely agree with you, Brooke, with what you have said. You are raising very important. I think we have to be proud of the Dangote Group and the investment they are doing and everything they are bringing in within Ethiopia. I mean, yeah, I'm not an investment expert, so and for that case, I'm trying to play the devil's side here, but I mean, I believe in the investment. I like the investment by the fact that it is being done by the Dangote Group, and I appreciate the fact that it's doing all of these things, taking the risk, taking the capital in the region, which we are also uncertain of. We know how fragile it is. You know, you have already talked about the possibility of attacks from the conflicts in the region. You know, all of those issues that we are raising. But I mean, I'm trying to just be critical because I mean, just as any other business person, we all know what the model that we are all in: economic growth, private capital. You know, this is my capital. So Dangote, as a businessman, is trying out, is doing business. So that's what I'm trying to say here. Like, this is where we need to be careful, and this is why I raised the other point. Like, we should be careful to ensure that we are not getting into a trap of running away from Western and European, corporations or investors whom we are saying they are doing overall of repatriation. They come, they invest and take away. We may be creating another African homegrown tycoon who is going to just accumulate for himself. So the question would be, you raised a very important question, like, yes, one of the major challenges within our countries is lack of capital. We don't have capital to do these investments, and that's why we look outside from these corporations which already have capital. For instance, the Dangote, they have capital and they are ready to invest. And if they are ready to take the risk, yes, we give them space to take that risk. But to what extent are they to what extent are they going to ensure that at the end of this project, or within the period of the project, are they going to create platforms for ensuring that maybe this capital that we all yearn for is going to be started to accumulate? How many other local companies or groups that are going to be in position to accumulate the capital that maybe the next investment, maybe we say in irrigation or any other sector, can be invested in by local companies? So that's my other side of view, which I would like us also not to, totally forget, because at the end of the day, we may say, yes, he has taken a risk, but as a business person, he knows what he's doing. And if that risk happens not to be a risk in the end, and it turns out to be a profitable investment, so we have to ensure that we have a plan that will make sure that if something doesn't go wrong and the investment has gone right, has gone as planned, we have to ensure that the community gains from this investment, or all of other stakeholders that are supposed to gain from the investment benefit from the investment, and it has those African values. And I think this also takes me to the other part where Abdul was talking about the continental goals. I mean, I believe in that and I really like that, but the continental goals for who? Because if we have only one billionaire who is representing the African continent, then that one is not progress. We need progress whereby we say we have met the continental target, not for Westerners, not for Europeans, not for foreigners, but for our people. To what extent have we met the continental goals by improving the lives of the people? We cannot celebrate an investment that is displacing 1,000 people only in the name of one person who is taking a risk. No, that one is not progress, and that one is not our continental goal. Our continental goal is to ensure that we have investments that are benefiting the people, that are owned by our people, that are going back, to uplift all of the communities, but not just a few people from the community. So, but I mean, those are other side of view that we need to consider as well as we celebrate this investment. Over to you, Abdul.
No, okay.
Oh, Brooke. Yeah.
Yeah, Brooke, I think, Brooke, I just wanted to ask one thing. Based on, they are locating this factory because of some natural gas deposits in the Somalia region. I just want to know, have they started producing it, or is just that the discovery has been made and now they are planning to produce it?
So apparently the construction is complete and testing has been done. Yeah, so the fertilizer facility, to my knowledge, cannot function without a developed natural gas. So a dedicated pipe is already being made from the natural gas facility to the fertilizer plant. So yeah, the natural gas has been developed and will be inaugurated this September.
Okay. Because the reason why I'm asking is that in the case of Nigeria, Nigeria has a lot of natural gas deposits, and then you come to realize that even the current one in Nigeria, there were some supply issues of natural gas and the capacity of output reduced drastically because of that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely it's going to be a valid concern. But I think also to piggyback on Comrade's argument, I think the Dangote Group knows what it's doing. So if they're going to be making a huge fertilizer investment, they must have made damn sure that the inputs and ingredients are actually close by and they're actually actionable. And I was even surprised that, unlike many African governments who would have preferred to simply export the natural gas, that the government had prioritized, okay, we have natural gas, we're not going to export it. We're going to sell it in the local market until the fertilizer plant comes in. And the natural gas is going to be strategically leveraged to locally produce fertilizer to Ethiopian farmers. And I think that says a lot, because I know that a lot of governments would rather export the natural gas for foreign currency as opposed to manufacturing fertilizer, which is a politically strategic commodity, since a lot of farmers really don't care about a lot of things. Like fertilizer is the one important thing for every farmer if you've been to the countryside.
Yes, exactly. I remember during the Russia-Ukraine war when it started somewhere 22, right? You realize that the price of fertilizer actually jumped so much so that me personally, the amount of fertilizer we're using in our farms actually reduced. And later on, when I was reading about it, generally internationally, the price that jumped about 50% in fertilizer prices. So I think that the Ethiopian government knows what it's doing. If you have a country that imports about 1.5 million, you say, tons of fertilizer, it's important to know that these international trades are subjected to geopolitics. And of late, the geopolitical system has become more disrupted, and you don't know when something is going to lock up and your people are going to go to bed hungry. So I think it's a strategic move to have a fertilizer industry in Ethiopia. That means that you matter the external threats, you'll be able to produce. What you just need to prevent now is a domestic kind of conflict or whatever that would disrupt the production. And food is what we need. If we have food, then we can think about everything else. But if you don't have food, you can't even have the peace of mind to think about others. So I commend the Ethiopian government for this strategic move. I read in Ghana, we've been trying to do this with the Moroccans. You know, Morocco is a huge producer of, is it phosphate? I think so. And we've been trying to see that they establish a factory in Ghana for us, but it has always lagged. They've been doing feasibility analysis forever. And I think it makes sense because we have, as of 2022, we have about a 450 million market of fertilizer. So I don't know whether that is enough to convince them to come invest or not. So I guess in the Ethiopian case, they were able to win a contract, and it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you, but in the Ethiopian case, I don't know if you can hear me. I was trying to look at the supply of the natural gas, because I think like everything, nothing has yet kicked on, because I think they just signed this deal and they are just in planning to do the project construction and everything. Even gas exploitation hasn't started. But I mean, I was reading and seeing that they had contracted, Ethiopian government, I think, had contracted a Chinese operator, and there were some issues to exploit and provide this gas from within. So, I mean, I think this one, when I was looking at it, it indicated that there are still a lot of other actors and stakeholders that will have an influence in the whole operation, because, I mean, if Dangote is making the investment specifically for the fertilizer, structure, and then another company has to engage in the exploitation and provision of this natural gas. So there are some issues which have to be followed up, you see, because there are different players and actors. So the question will also arise that whether there will be a stable supply of this natural gas to keep the facility running, because based on that aspect, that maybe some companies which were engaged in the exploitation and provision of the natural gas have had faced such some of these issues. So I mean, there are a lot of things to keep an eye on from that point of view, whether the investment and the project will be a success. But it is something to celebrate, as we have been saying, that they have already, the deal has been signed for by, especially with the Dangote group, to ensure that the facility is constructed and the investments are all done. So that is something that we can celebrate already, but also keep in mind that there are other players, especially from the natural gas point of view, considering the fact that the facility is supposed to be supplied by the natural gas. And if at all there have been already some of these issues, this is something that needs to also be looked at and kept in the mind. Yeah. Bro, back to you.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Earlier, the idea was about exporting through Djibouti, and yeah, once the Chinese finished constructing the facility, the idea was to export, but there was a problem with exporting. One is it's really expensive to lay down the piping from Ethiopia through another country, Somalia, then to Djibouti. So you're going through two countries. Especially Somalia is a very fragile country. You know, like a sizable portion of the country is currently held by Al-Shabaab, especially the areas adjacent to Ethiopia. They are under the effective control of Al-Shabaab. So I think the government had to rethink, and I think it's a good thing that the government is saying, okay, we shouldn't really export. And I do believe that this didn't actually come from, like, I think the goodwill of the Ethiopian government. Any government, be it African or abroad, would have preferred, easily accessible oil money. You export and you just get the dollars, just flows through the pipe. But this is a result of like an unfortunate set of circumstances, which didn't really allow the Ethiopian government to export via pipe. Then the government circled back and said, like, let's use the natural gas locally. And as also Comrade mentioned, the government has been somewhat hush about the natural gas, which isn't necessarily a good thing, because I think governments should be transparent about their projects, and especially about huge natural resource deposits. But the government insists that it's in the national interest that they're keeping these things under wraps, to avoid incursion by terrorists, and maybe avoid the project from coming under, evil eyes. That's what the prime minister put it. Even so, he says that I think what Comrade said is really important. Yeah, I think the natural gas deposits should be effective, or the fertilizer plants wouldn't make sense. And I also share Erisa's skepticism, and also Abdulbari's skepticism in terms of natural gas discoveries and their productivity after discovery, not only in Ethiopia, but as we've seen in Ghana and even in Nigeria to a certain extent, and how they have fallen short of delivering actual value to society.
Yeah, I think those concerns are legit. But on the other hand, I look at the Dangote company, and then you see that it's a private individual. And before a private investor goes into a decision, it means that, and look here, he owns 60% of the deal. So it means that he has done what is necessary. So that is the part that I look, and then I have some positive view about the deal. If it was two governments that were coming together, we know for governments, they can just overlook some of the nuances of the project and just move on for political things. But you see that, let's say Dangote doesn't have anything political to cater for. What he needs is money. What he needs is the factory should be up and running. And it means that he has done the feasibility analysis. He has all these things we're talking about. Maybe he has done the projections to be sure that everything is going to be in place. And that is why he went into the deal. So the fact that he's a private individual, I believe that the right thing has been done on the part of the Ethiopian government. That is why he went into that deal. Yeah.
Yeah, and to also jump in for a moment, you're right. As it was the case in Ghana, the Moroccans had approached Ethiopia earlier. They wanted to build this humongous fertilizer plant, not around this particular area, but a bit north to it at Reda, and it never really materialized. And I think the same thing happened. What happened in Ghana also happened in Ethiopia. Like they promised that they're leaders in fossil production. They have a huge track record in terms of manufacturing fertilizer, but they didn't execute. And I think it also takes me back to the question about the political willingness, the risk appetite, because what we have seen is, even though like Morocco is a leader in phosphate production, they're not really keen on strategic issues unless there is a clear signal and a clear money for it. They're not really interested in investing in sub-Saharan Africa. There is too much risk for their appetite. And it's something that at least I have noted, because I know the fact that Morocco is a leader in fertilizer production, but yeah, the project, besides an MOU, didn't move an actual inch. And even for this project, I think it's something inspiring that Dangote has a track record of execution, more recently with the refinery in Nigeria. But still, I would be quite skeptical unless I see the project executed and delivered. Because there are a lot of promises being made, but delays, overrun costs, unfortunately, are some of the hallmarks of big mega projects in Africa. And I watch at this with certain reservation that unless this political will and enthusiasm goes all the way through consistently, it might be, another pipe dream. Back to you, Arisa.
Exactly. I think I absolutely agree with you, Brooke. You brought in a very interesting context of the political will. This is something that we cannot, remove away from this discussion, especially in the context of our African continent. Because I mean, we are, I think, at a particular point sharing a class, and I was not really happy with the way how the professor was raising a point that, well, of course, it was true, but I mean, as a Pan-Africanist, I didn't like it because it was like he was talking about the reality that, any person with capital or these investors, there is no any investor who will take his or her money to invest the money in a fragile society where they are not assured, for instance, of the political situation, the security in the area, because it is all a risk, as we have been all talking about the way how that region, the Somali region, how it is fragile to conflicts, and across even most of African countries, we see countries where you don't know what will happen in the next 5 or 10 years, so the investors always, they analyze those situations, and this is something that is really a disadvantage to our African context. And not only that, I mean, they look at different aspects. I think, yeah, all of us, we are sharing that very same class, the three of us. You look at the market, you look at the political situation, you look at the infrastructure, you look at a lot of things which are not going well in our context. So it all goes back to the politics. It all goes back to our political leaders. So if we haven't sorted that out, to have the political will of the people in the government, people who are running our governments, or people who are running the state, to prioritize all of these other aspects that need to be, collected. For instance, ensuring that there is security, there are these investors to have a favorable environment to bring in the money, because I mean, we know they have the money. and they are in a good shape and position to bring in the money and invest and do all of these big projects that we want to, to come in the society and boost the economy. So if at all of those issues are not sorted out, still, as you mentioned clearly, broke, that we will not have, long-term investments or huge investments. People cannot risk their billions and billions to take them in an area where they are not sure of what will happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So it goes back to us. And by the way, just that for me, I don't even believe in the system that we are pursuing, the economic model that our governments are pursuing. But I would suggest something that is totally different, maybe to start having state-led, state-led investments, because the state, we assume that it is going to be serving its own people, leave alone even the government, that we see some governments which are changing every after 5 years or 7 or 6 years. But if we have the state that is really interested in developing its own people, then we should have investments which are hugely having higher stakes or shares from the state than maybe trusting these individual people, which we all know that for a private investor, at the end of the day, they are after profit accumulation and, accumulating wealth and profits for themselves, but not necessarily for everyone in the community, which is still a problem. That, we are having all of these mushrooming, growing capitals across Africa, but when you really disaggregate and go down to see who owns the wealth within these capitals, there are a few people, which still doesn't help the continent. You can say at a continental level, the GDP for Africa, I think Abdul is an economist, is very good in this. The GDP has grown by this and that, but when you really go down to the ground and see who is well off, there are a few people, and majority of the people are still struggling with life. I wouldn't like to bring in this aspect of we are having huge cities around Africa, but the living cost is there. In fact, you go into a city where the local real people of that country cannot afford to live in those cities. So we have constructed this kind of society whereby it is okay for a few people who have wealth, a few people who have means of living, to stay within the society, but the local people themselves cannot afford life. So I mean, this all comes with all of these investment. That's why it all goes back to the fact that we need to have a strong hand from the state to ensure that if this investment and all the projects that are associated happen to take off, or they start and the investment is doing well, we have to ensure that all the benefits accrue back to the community, such that we don't raise one billionaire, we don't raise one group as the Dangote group, we raise other group as well, we raise the community, such that this capital that we don't have, the primary problem with capital is concentrated in a few people. 1% hold the hugest amount of capital. The rest, they are just earners. We're just, surviving on wages and income. And income or wages, they don't create wealth. Wealth is created by capital. So a few people who have capital, if they continue to hold all of these investment, and that's why for me I'm very critical against Dangote. So I have to hold Dangote accountable. How many other billionaires will Dangote be able to create? That is my basic question, I think. Like, yeah, as a Pan-Africanist, will he be able to replicate and create more other billionaires that maybe we hear about? The next investment in fertilizer in Ghana is led by a different group, not Dangote. We hear another investment, for instance, maybe in South Africa or in Kampala, Uganda, or other countries, led by different groups. So that's kind of my critical point of view, to ensure that, as you were saying, Brooke, in the beginning, that we don't have capital, but how do we ensure that we distribute or redistribute this capital to other groups? As you were saying, that maybe the Ethiopian airline has a share in the Ethiopian investment hub and other companies. So we should try to grow these other groups as well, and ensure that at the end of the day, we have multiple investors, and this capital that we say we don't have has been able to redistribute into other hands. We have multiple investors, not just a clique of a few group of Dangote moving from one country to another holding investments, because as Abdul mentioned, that this is a private company, is a private person. At the end of the day, it's about business. So yeah, that's my critical view, but I appreciate what you raised. Very important point. We need the political will. We need our leaders to intervene. We need the state. We need the government to come in and regulate and ensure that there is proper distribution of wealth and benefits that are coming out from such an investment.
Yeah,
Abdul, yeah,
I think we have to end here. It has
yes,
gone far, but I think the inequality matter we have to I think we discussed it last time, but it wasn't enough. I think we have to have another time to discuss it.
exactly. Okay, so I don't know if you have any closing remarks, Abdul or Brooks.
Hello. I think this was a very interesting discussion, a very in-depth discussion about recent set of developments within the African economy. So I'm really glad that I had the chance to discuss with you on this particular topic. And I don't have anything to add. I think I have offloaded all of the thoughts which I had. And yeah, I think it's great that we analyzed these recent investments, not only from a positive Pan-African view, but also from a much needed critical vantage point where maybe not everything is rosy or green with regards to this investment project. And I think that's the type of perception and outlook that we need to have towards investments that are coming in, because I think it's this type of reflection and analysis that's more constructive. When everyone is looking in the other direction, I think someone needs to keep a watch out for the other direction. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's what I had to add. Yeah.
Exactly. Abdul?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Mr. Bakba?
thoughts are, we say thoughts are, let me say it's a flow variable. So at the moment, just like Brooke said, I've offloaded my thoughts maybe until I have new information to form new thoughts. That is what is available now.
Exactly, yeah. So just for me, just one word, I think, yeah, I agree with absolutely what we have discussed. We need investments. It is a great deal to see this deal that the Dangote Group has broked with the Ethiopian Investment Hub. It comes at a critical time when we are saying, there are a lot of cuts, especially in the development sector. Like for me personally, I come from international development perspective. USA is now pursuing the, make America great again. We all know that, and all of these countries are cutting off their development aid which they have been sending to African countries, and all of the risks we have talked about that are happening within our African countries, they scare away these foreign investors. So if we see someone who is brilliant from within the continent ready to take up the risks, it's something to celebrate. But as we have mentioned and talked, that there are a lot of these other issues that we shouldn't skip. And I wish that the Ethiopian government and all other stakeholders rise up and have all of these issues, put on the table, discussed, and ensure that if the investment succeeds and it happens, the benefits accrue and go back to the community, and we rise together as a country and as a continent. So thank you. It was a pleasure to catch up. Hopefully we shall be catching up very soon in our next episode next week. So see you guys.
See you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.